So I've just started off in full electric mode. Here we go, going out on the track in a car with a modern... There's the engine. Tell you what, it's noisy in here. Much noisier inside than outside. There it goes. Just keeps revving. The noise is sensational. It's a mighty, mighty experience.
F1 rules state that teams can only use 1.6-litre V6 engines. So that's what's sitting at the heart of the AMG One. A V6 engine that can spin up to a stratospheric 11,000 RPM.
So I have about 560 horsepower from the engine, and the rest, which adds up to over 1,000 horsepower, is coming from electric motors. 0 to 60, 2.9 seconds, top speed 219 miles an hour. They sound enormous numbers, don't they? But of course, that's not much quicker than some high-end supercars.
The One hasn't been conceived to sit at the top of a deck of top trumps, though. Think of it instead as a challenge.
With the AMG One, you actually have 5 motors. You've got that internal combustion engine, that's a motor. 2 motors on the front wheels and a motor coming off the crank as well. And the 5th one's actually in the turbocharger to help it reduce lag.
Putting all of this together is pretty much automotive Everest. An engineering mountain so great that Mercedes engineers just had to see if they could.
It's not like anything I've driven before. So the powertrain just stopped, the engine stopped, and it then just restarted itself.
Assuming Mercedes engineers weren't intending unexpected pit stops to be part of the owner experience, the early signs were that there was still a bit of mountain left to climb.
So the problem was, twice during full braking, when I was on a downshift and the revs went high, the auto blip would blip the throttle, and then the engine would just cut.
Quite why the engine is cutting out under braking turns out to be a tricky problem to diagnose. So much so, in fact, that Mercedes wheels out a second car to get us back up and running. So, where were we?
Racing cars have to comply with 1 million regulations, but road cars, well, they have to comply with 1 million totally different regulations. Put the two together, this must be the most complicated road car ever made. No wonder it's having some teething problems now. The chassis is the bit that I'm finding a little bit tricky at the moment. Whatever I do, I've got this understeer. I can't really get rid of it.
And the bigger problem is, while they've been trying to get it all working out on track, you get the feeling Mercedes hasn't had the chance to sort all the other stuff that makes a road car livable.
The noise, again, I come back to it, it's so extreme, I've actually put some earplugs in. I'm just bolted straight into the chassis and the engine's bolted to that. So I'm kind of connected to the vehicle in a way you aren't in most supercars. Steering wheel is a strange shape. Seating position, I'm not so sure really. The seat is fixed, the pedals move, but someone tall is going to struggle in this thing. And the seat, there's not much support, I'm kind of moving around in it. And how do you maintain a Formula One engine on the road? Well, Mercedes is saying that you'll need an engine rebuild every 30,000 miles. Doesn't seem unreasonable, but it will cost you £700,000.
Or at least it will, if you get that far.
Oh, right. Well, the aero limit is now coming on, so it just stops at 145 k's. Oh, dear. I tell you what, it's not been an easy day for the AMG One.
The second car now has an issue with the sensor on its active rear wing, which in turn has triggered a speed limiter on the engine.
Tell you what, if you paid £2.5 million for it, you wouldn't be over the moon.
But after a lot more head scratching to get around all the bugs in the drivetrain and aero systems, the fix that the engineers come up with is a promising one. Putting the AMG One into its most extreme drive mode would force the car to deploy maximum aero and maximum performance for one last run. That mode is the same one Lewis Hamilton uses in F1 qualifying, and it's called Strat 2.
Quite serious. God, it's fast through there. Woo! That's where the aero really is working. The concept just makes me grin while I'm sitting here. This is the engine that genuinely won World Championships. And that noise. Oh, what a noise.
When that incredible engine and those ridiculously aggressive wings actually start working together, this car finally starts to make some sort of sense.
Do you know what? Once you're in it, it feels so much more special. Because that engine's unlike anything I've ever driven before. And it's 1.6 litres. Get your head around that. And I love the fact that it revs to 11. Nothing revs to 11.
The AMG One, then, might well be a flawed machine, but that doesn't stop it being one of the most fascinating, intriguing cars I've ever driven.
There was a word for this summer project years ago. It was called a folly. Something that was just so fraught with difficulties, you wonder why someone would bother. I suppose I have to ask myself, do I think it was worth it? Because it's not the best driving or fastest supercar I've driven, let alone hypercar. But there's just something so appealing about it when it's up and running. When it's up and running. It's unlike any other driving experience I've had. And at the end of it all, this is an engine from a Formula One car. And that's probably enough for me.